Hello friends, today we're going to learn how to make gradient text in Photoshop using two simple methods. So let's get started. What's cooking? My name's Brennan from BeWillCreative.com, and on this channel we love to talk about photography, photo editing, and particularly Photoshop, so if that sounds like something that you'd be into, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a video. Now in this tutorial we're going to show you how to create gradient text with colors, and then also how to create gradient text that transitions from color to transparency. So no matter what types of gradients you're wanting to create today, you're going to learn exactly how to do it in this tutorial. So let's hop into Photoshop and see how it's done. So the first thing that we will do is create a text layer, because of course we need to make some text to create a gradient. So I'll grab my text tool by clicking there, and I'll add some text to my image. In this case, I'll just call it gradient. I'll press the checkbox to commit to that, and then I'll just reposition this so I can see it nicely with my move tool. Before you create gradient text, the best way to do it is if you have a nice bold text, because the wider the text, the better the effect is going to look. However, if you want to use skinny text, that's totally fine. Just know that the gradient is obviously going to be a bit less visible. So rather than actually creating a gradient on a new layer, we can use something called a gradient overlay to speed up the whole process for us. So double clicking on the gradient text layer will open our layer style dialog box, and we'll go down to gradient overlay. So what this does is basically replaces the color of your text with a gradient that you get to choose all of the settings of right here in this option. So to change the type of gradient, you click on the gradient editor, and you have a bunch of presets that you can choose from if you would like, and that will change the look of your text. However, if you want to edit this gradient, all you have to do is double click on these color swatches down here like so, and then you can adjust those colors to better match whatever you're going for. So let's say I just want to make this more of like a red color, maybe like that. And then if you want to add additional colors to your gradient, you can click anywhere along the bottom of your gradient preview bar here and just click there to add another color swatch. And then you can reposition it as you would like, depending on how dominant you want it to be in your gradient. Double clicking on that again, I'll maybe change this one to a nice orange color like so. And then now we have a pretty typical regular gradient text created. From here, you can go ahead and fine tune this gradient with all of these settings. So to start off, I usually will check off dither, because that's going to smooth any irregularities between different colors. So if you have a bunch of colors or there's a big difference between each color, dither is going to help to smooth everything out and make sure that there's no banding. From there, you can change the style to dictate how the gradient is actually going to look in your text. However, for most text effects, I suggest that linear is going to be the best option for you. From there, you can adjust where the angle of your gradient is coming from just by adjusting the little icon in the circle here. And you can get a ton of great effects like that. If you want it to be coming from the side, all you have to do is set it to 0 or 180 degrees, depending on where you want the text to be coming from, like that. And then obviously 90 degrees or negative 90 degrees if you want it to be going up and down. Now let's say I want the pink color to be on the top of my text. Rather than redoing my actual gradient in the gradient editor, I can just click the reverse option, and it's going to switch those colors around for me in the gradient. From there, you can also adjust the amount of transition time between each color with the scale. As I increase the scale, notice how all the colors become a little bit less dominant, and that's because the feather or the softness between each color is becoming larger. However, if I go down to a lower percentage like this, you can see that there's a very harsh transition between each color. So I like to usually keep this somewhere in the middle, so you get a nice balance of both. So now that you know how to add a colored gradient to your text, let's talk about transparent gradients. So double clicking once again on that gradient layer, I'll go to gradient overlay, and this time I'm going to go over here to my basics and select the foreground to transparent gradient. So as you can see, it has a solid color and then goes all the way out to transparency or invisibility over here. I'll click OK, but then as you see, there's no actual effect happening. And the reason this happens is because your text already has a color, and the gradient overlay is simply adding something on top of that. So even though the gradient is set to foreground to transparent and it is doing its job, the reason that it's not making your text invisible is because the text itself has a color. So that means that the easier way to go about this is by actually getting rid of part of your text rather than applying an overlay like so. That might sound a little complicated, but you can easily do this with the help of a layer mask. So with your text layer selected, I will click on the layer mask icon to add a new layer mask. I'll select the gradient tool over here, go to my gradient editor, and make sure that the foreground to transparent gradient is selected. I'll then choose a linear gradient since I want it to be a nice straight line for my gradient effect. And then I'll set my foreground color to black because that's going to make the text partly transparent on our layer mask. So to give you an example, I'll just click and drag up like so, and that's going to fade out the bottom of my text. I can add in more and more until the entire bottom is gone like that. And now we've created a cool gradient effect going from the bottom to the top. The beauty about the layer mask, however, is that you can easily adjust it or go back. So let's say I don't like this gradient anymore, and I can just click on that layer mask and then fill it with white by pressing Command or Control and Delete to fill that layer with the background color, which in this case is white. And then I have a fresh layer mask to work with. From there, I can once again select my gradient to go in a different direction, add transparency coming from somewhere else, and it all works just the same. From there, you can get really creative with your gradients, and you can double click on your gradient overlay option to re-access your settings. And then you can click the gradient editor and select one of the preset options or make your own here. So then you can mix color gradients on your text with a transparent gradient to get a ton of awesome text gradient effects. So with that, that is how you create text gradients in Photoshop. Alright guys, so if you enjoyed this tutorial and you learned something today, then make sure to hit that like button, as it really does make a difference, and also consider subscribing so you stay up to date with more awesome tutorials like today. Anyways guys, that's all I have for you for today. Again, my name's Brendan from BeWellCreative.com. I'll catch you back here next time for another new tutorial. See you then.